Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a social studies educator, historian, and host of this, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. I'm also an avid collector of popular culture artifacts. I love what I find at thrift store outlets, garage sale leftovers, and what I spot just making my way around the built world. I enjoy sorting through boxes of free books and magazines, not to mention online collections like Internet Archive, and of course the Library of Congress. But you don't need to spend your time digging through bins or following online rabbit holes to get a look into the past. The movies and TV we watch, the books we read, and the games we play are all documents of the past. So is fashion, food, music, toys, even the roads we travel on and the places we live and work in. Everything is a primary source. This podcast is the result of exhibiting these kinds of artifacts in public, getting passersby to select an item they connect with, and then chatting with me to see what it says about the time, place, and people who made it. The conversation you are about to hear, therefore, is your history, my history, our history, through popular culture. Hey Gilbert, how's it going?
It's going good, man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Welcome to Boston. Have you been to Boston before?
I have not.
How long have you been here? For just a couple hours?
Thursday. Got here Thursday.
Okay, all right. So you get to explore the city a lot?
A little bit. It was pouring out raining yesterday.
Yeah, that's pretty Boston for you. Welcome to Boston. Pouring rain for you. So where are you from?
Louisiana.
Born and raised?
Born and raised.
Born and raised. Where in Louisiana?
All right, so this is going to be hard to explain, but about 45 minutes south of New Orleans.
So that's a good way to put it, because I think a lot of people wrongly picture New Orleans being right on the Gulf Coast.
It's not. It's about an hour south.
It's actually
a little town called Houma, Louisiana.
Okay. And what is there anything that popular culture-wise would people know about your town that they'd recognize?
Oh, swamp people.
Okay.
Immediately.
So
easy.
That's the big contribution or the big connection.
That's the first thing somebody says to me when I say I'm from Louisiana is, "Oh, I watch Swamp People."
Do you and when it comes to that, we're talking about an entire culture, really. Swamp People is not something that people. You're not a part-time swamp person, right?
No.
It's part of the.
That's who they are. It's ingrained in their blood.
And tell me a little bit about being a social studies teacher. How long have you been in the profession?
It's 5 years.
Okay.
I'm a fifth-year teacher.
What drew you to it?
My high school social studies teacher.
I have a feeling that if we polled everybody in this room right now, 98% of them would have a very similar answer. So what was it about your high school? You can give a shout out if you'd like.
Mr. Phillips, he taught through things. And you could tell that he was passionate about what he did and the way he taught. For example, the World Wars, he had artifacts from those time periods. And being a young kid, being able to see those, physically touch those things and hold those things. I mean, things you probably couldn't do today, like hold grenades and things like that you could not possibly do today. Right? Yeah, you could not. Careful. Very careful.
Well, there is, when you mentioned where you're from, I immediately thought of the D-Day Museum in New Orleans.
That's right, yes.
With the Higgins boats.
That's right.
And that those were directly inspired by swamp people, right? Because those flat-bottom boats could go in shallow water. And I think it was Eisenhower that said that those won the war for the United States. It's the design that was really created because of the environment that you're in. So I'm assuming your teacher, at some point,
Absolutely.
your brother
100%.
brought that up.
Absolutely.
Do you feel that a social studies classroom that you teach in now has resemblance to the one that inspired you to be a teacher?
Oh, man. Some days, yes. Some days, no. And you got to be real with yourself as a teacher, and say, some days they're on point and things are going and cruising, and then some days it's a dead stop.
Do you think that your favorite teacher had similar days like that?
100%. I think that's a reality of teaching.
You just probably didn't recognize it until you're on the other side of the desk. Now you're like, oh, I get it. It's
I get it.
You build a lesson plan, you get something going, and if it doesn't hit, you feel like, oh.
Yeah.
Do you teach? So tell me some of the courses that you teach.
So I teach, mostly taught civics/government. So I taught regular civics classes in Louisiana, the government classes, the honors classes. So I've taught that for a few years, and I've also taught world geography for a few years. Mostly freshmen and sophomores.
Do you find that you can cross things over between any of those parts? I know world geography, civics.
Yeah, there's, I won't say a disconnect, but definitely different spectrums of the social studies realm when it comes to that.
And that's something that a lot of people outside, even within your school, might not recognize about your job title, is that we're not all history teachers.
That's right.
Right? Like social studies is a broad term. It means everything from history to economics, geography, civics,
psychology, sociology.
Everything. I mean, we are, and one of my colleagues from our council put it very well last week. She said, we're the glue of the school. Right? We hold it all together. We are the hub, just like the library is. So I'm assuming that those kinds of struggles, those stumbling blocks are probably true for Mr. Phillips the same way they are for you. Does modern technology enhance or does it sometimes hinder your teaching?
That's a good question. Definitely enhance. I think the tools available to teachers today are absolutely, I don't want to say limitless, but sure close to being limitless when it comes to technology. We can instantly share information with each other and provide each other with, a plethora of sources that teachers can use. But I also think it can be a hindrance as well. I feel like as a teacher, you got to put your own niche on things, and not everything's going to work for you as a teacher as it will for another teacher. And you've got to kind of fit those things to work with.
You got to personalize it. You got to make sure it's. I remember seeing a video, probably about halfway through my teaching career, that somebody sent me. And it was this guy named Pip Hughes. He's on YouTube. He's a YouTube teacher. I think he's a social studies guy, and he had the recipe for being a successful teacher, and that was one of them. He said, you got to be yourself. If you're not you, if you're not owning what you do, then the kids are not going to buy in. And it sounds like your inspiration teacher. For me, it was a couple teachers. Krista McAuliffe was one of them. She wasn't my teacher. I was 5 years old when she died. But she was a New Hampshire social studies teacher, so I've used her as a guidepost as an adult. But when I was in high school, it was actually a physics teacher that did it for me, Mr. Mazzella. And he brought a subject that honestly is kind of dull for a humanities person like myself, physics, to life. He made it exciting, and he held us to a very high standard. I took physics in college because I had to. I couldn't stand it because it was taught totally different than the way he did. Yeah. He personalized it. He was himself. He was a real, genuine educator, and that's why I cared about it, because he did. Yeah. And it sounds like that might be part of the key to success.
I always tell my kids, I'll make them cringe laugh because they're teenagers. I always say this: if they don't think I'm weird, like in a positive way, then I'm not doing something right. Like, if I don't make some type of joke or something to try and bring it to life, and they know, hey, you're not having a good day, Mr. Marcel, what's going on?
So they see that as
why are you not yourself? You're not being yourself.
That's so it feels good in a way to know that you have that kind of connection, that kids that you care for each other. It's not just a job kind of thing. And so
how's it going?
To segue to the next part, but real quick, I just want to ask you, is there a particular lesson that you do that you feel is like
everyone likes the slogan,
your bread and butter, your thing that...
Oh, propaganda.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Yeah. Media literacy and propaganda for sure. I love teaching it every year in civics because I like to show students that how much propaganda they're actually exposed to on a daily basis. From every advertiser, from Coca-Cola to Dunkin' Coffee to all these companies that are using imagery and messages to us almost without us not even thinking about it, that encourage us encourage us to buy products and then transforming that into like a political content.
Yeah.
How much misinformation is out there and how much campaigns across the board are using propaganda to influence you to make decisions. And now with TikTok and the introduction of all this technology we have, how much of it is influenced by AI, etc.
We are just a few blocks away from where one of the earliest American pieces of propaganda was created, and that would be that of the Bloody Massacre by Paul Revere. I was just actually using that in class yesterday with my class. I'm teaching a current events class, and we deal with bias and fake news and things like that. And I had us dissect Paul Revere's rendition of what, because of that piece, was referred to as the Boston Massacre. It was a tragic event. It was something that was awful, but it was by no means what he presented it as.
Oh, they used it as it was a masterful piece of propaganda, too. It worked.
Yeah, the angry-looking, like the soldiers looking happy almost that they're killing people for no reason at all. It's a like you said, masterful thing.
Yes.
That's the elevator.
I love what you have to say, so we'll now segue, and I'll probably delete this part out, but let's segue to talking about Star Wars.
Sure.
So I have, on my podcast, talked Star Wars, different versions of it, different elements of that movie. I honestly can't talk about it enough, because it is the ultimate history through pop culture moment.
For sure.
The original movie is itself historic in when and why it came about. Its influences on popular culture. You're wearing a shirt right now inspired by that. And by the end of the way it was received in the 70s is also very much a sign of that time period. There's so much excitement for it. And the reaction to it culturally is incomparable. They were going to make a sequel no matter what. I mean, it was just so clear by the end of that movie and the way it was taken that we're going to make a second one. Of all the iterations of Star Wars, all the different eras, original trilogy, prequel trilogy, and now the sequel trilogy, which one do you ascribe to? Which one's your connection?
Oh man! So there's got to be two. In the OG trilogy, it's got to be Empire Strikes Back, and then in the prequel trilogy, it's got to be Revenge of the Sith. Like we're not going to talk about the new movie.
Yeah. Is there? So I was thinking about it. I'm fortunate enough I teach a pop culture elective.
That's cool.
It starts with the 70s. I mean, it's only a semester long, so we can't do the whole American pop culture. But it starts with the 70s and works its way up to the present. And I realized at one point, I'm like, there's been a Star Wars movie in every single decade since the 70s.
Like I said,
Just narrowly in some cases. But yeah, Return of the Jedi was 1983.
And they speak to that generation, which is crazy.
Right. So I want to know, let's talk Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
Because the last installment of the prequel trilogy, first of all, after years of George Lucas saying, I'm not going to make more of these, what do you think made him go back and make a new trilogy?
Did you know that Everything is a Primary Source now has a series of short videos which, like the podcast, teach social studies concepts through popular culture? Check out the Everything is a Primary Source Finds playlist on YouTube for quick overviews of the artifacts I uncover at Goodwill outlets, pick up from the side of the road, or resurrect from my youth, because I don't throw much out. These are great class starters for teachers, and because each clip ends with citation, they're great for students too. Furthermore, EPS Finds episodes become the starting point for the open source Everything's a Primary Source project, which encourages you and your students, if you have some, to add to the conversation. Or you can just enjoy them as you would any one of the other billions of clips on YouTube. It's up to you. Go to YouTube and become a subscriber to the Everything's a Primary Source channel today. Now, back to the conversation.
Well, he always said that he had them written, but he said the technology didn't exist at the time for him to create them the way he wanted to create them.
Yeah.
So I feel like a part of it is going to be George Lucas realizing that computer technology is now a thing, and that we can do really good animation through computer technology. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And probably his wallet too.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like, well, because it's hard to remember, but Star Wars did kind of hit a bit of a lull in the 90s. It stayed alive pretty well through toys, mainly
I was about
in the
to say
80s.
that. Yeah, 'cause that's how. Yeah.
But in the 90s, it was the comic books.
That's right.
And that's where Boba Fett became
Video games too. So
yeah, video games started, and they had what was it? Shadows of the Empire came out in book form, and then a video game companion.
Yeah, and you had all the books written of the trilogy after.
Right.
But, you know, that was all in.
Those are pretty good books, too.
They are.
And
which now you're seeing those come back now.
Right. As legitimate.
In legitimate movies and now new, you know.
What's funny about the sequel trilogy is because what we're describing is kind of like piecemeal. It's not as well connected. When the sequel trilogy was coming out, I remember getting kind of annoyed because I'd go watch the movies. That was the only thing I had time for in my life, was to go see the movies. And I'm like, I feel like I'm missing something. Yeah. And then you go to the YouTube channels, you go to the Star Wars website. It's like, well, if you read the book 2 of the, such and such trilogy, then it'll explain. I'm like, I shouldn't have to do that. I should read these books if I want to. Because I read a lot of those books in the 90s, like the Jedi Academy ones. I like those a lot. And you can definitely see where they're pulling from some of those storylines in the sequel, with having, like Han and Leia's children as being characters. The Ben Solo component is definitely from those trilogies. But they weren't required to enjoy the prequel series.
That's right.
You could watch them as standalone things. You could play the video game tie-ins if you wanted to, but you didn't have to. What does that say to you about that era in media and entertainment?
Oh, man. Well, first, I think the reason it was done that way is so you wouldn't have to go back. So new people could join the I hate to say revolution, but could join the Star Wars revolution and not have to go back so much to be included in the conversation. So it made it easier for people to get introduced. But that time, what are we talking, 90s?
Yeah, so 99 is when Phantom Menace came out, and then
so early
2005, I think, is when Revenge of the Sith.
Gaming technology is rapidly growing.
Yep.
So that's going to be a huge market for Star Wars to introduce all the characters and everything into that gamer market. And then that itself is going to, it's like a giant circle.
Yeah.
People want to see more movies, and then when they see the movies, they want to play more games, and they want to read more books and more comics.
Now that you mention it,
it's a giant circle.
Now that you say that, it checks out, because you think about, this code checks out. When you watch like Phantom Menace, that pod racing scene is very video game-ish.
That's right.
You keep getting that driver's seat.
And then that stupid game comes out and you can't beat that part. That's right. That's right.
And then, by the time you get to Revenge of the Sith, the lightsaber duels are very fighter game-ish.
Yeah, and I believe that's around when like Force Unleashed comes out. Maybe not. Might be.
But that came later, but it's like part of that same extension of things, because it's like it's a perfect, like you said, full circle reaction to it. That's a really good point. I think about, because the original movies, when they show, like the first Star Wars movie, that lightsaber duel is so. You have. I can do it pretty good on the microphone. And I remember Lucas saying that he envisioned the swords as being heavy.
That's right.
Even though they're called lightsabers, that they were almost like medieval broadswords, and it's an old man fighting a half robot guy. Yeah. So of course they're not going to be acrobatic about it. Empire shows up, Luke's doing jumps and spins, but nothing too crazy. By the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, they're bouncing all over the place.
It's wild.
It looks like Tekken 3. So it's like maybe they're borrowing from the media that's, or even the second one, Yoda's jumping off the rafters.
Oh yeah.
And it's like kind of fan service-ish, but it fits the media state at the time.
I think part of it is like what people wanted. Like people wanted the acrobatic, like you said, fan service more than they wanted the original trilogies. You know what I'm saying? So people wanted that movement forward, and
because it was a generation later.
Yeah.
So I think that started the original trilogy crowd of going, not my Star Wars.
Yeah.
But a kid, if you were 9, 10, 11, when those movies came out, that was your Star Wars.
It was. And you look at the actors too, like Hayden Christensen. Like he got so much grief for playing Anakin, and how people called him trash. But now you look at him, and he's like, to that generation, he's the guy.
Yeah.
They don't see anyone else.
He's Darth Vader.
Like, he's Darth Vader.
Because we saw him transform to Darth
That's
Vader.
right.
You know,
so it's like the swap of the generational, which is part of it that blows my mind, is the two different generations and their perspective on it.
So I'm curious. First of all, Star Wars is a lot of fun to hear old New Englanders talk about. The Star Wars, get the Star Wars cards at the comic book shops. It's a great opportunity to, Louisiana. Is Star Wars? Do you feel that Star Wars is received the same way in places like Louisiana as it is in Boston?
Okay. I got to give a shout out, and so I serve on a board for a festival we have down there called May the 4th, and so it started a couple years ago, and it was small, and it's kind of grown to like be a part of the community, and they raise money for the local high school bands, so all the festival money is donated, and it's a huge event. People come dressed up, the Mandalorian costumes, the Jedi robes. They have the training academy. Like they go all out as far as it's a lot of fun.
So it's kind of like this.
It's huge.
But
this big. But
Star
it's
Wars.
huge. Yeah.
But with people from all over.
Yes. Mostly in the Gulf Coast, southern region.
So are there like certain characters that maybe are more appealing to people in that part of the country, or would you say it's probably similar everywhere? Yeah. And I'm curious if Star Wars has any role in that kind of. I guess that would be a positive homogenization, because homogenization is not always a good thing culturally.
Sure, for sure.
I think about that. If you can go to any, like for me, when I visit somewhere new, one of the first things I want to try is the food that's specific to that location, and I get disappointed when it's Applebee's, Chili's, Wendy's, all the E's, apostrophe, and I'm like, I could get this anywhere. So that's a negative homogenization. But something like Star Wars, or really any other movie that has overall a positive, hopeful message, that's good homogenization, that we all connect to it, regardless of our...
It's the ultimate connector for like cultures, I think. I think no matter your background, like or where you're from, I think if you're a Star Wars fan, like you find that togetherness.
Yeah, because it takes place in space.
That's right.
In fictional space. It's not even like our solar system or something. And I guess you could maybe say, well, I could relate to Endor because there's lots of forests. And, but you really can't. Everybody's an alien to those places. Right. Nobody's a native. And that makes it, therefore, that we're all part of this.
But I think the aliens are a big part of it. And maybe not consciously, but I think one of the biggest messages out of Star Wars is that it doesn't matter who you are, or where you're from, or what you look like, or your background, or anything. We can all unite for one cause and one purpose and one goal.
That's one thing I saw a lot more in the sequel trilogy that wasn't really present in the other ones.
That's true.
Is that the Resistance, kind of like the new Rebels, incorporated a lot more different species.
Yeah.
You see a little bit of Return of the Jedi with Lando's co-pilot in the Millennium Falcon.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot to say his name, so I won't. But and obviously Chewbacca. But most of the pilots in the Rebels, and absolutely when you talk about clones. Right, in the second, it's like all the clones look the same.
But then they get their own personality too, and their own, their own story.
Right, and you get to learn a little bit about, what it's like to be a twin or to a million people. And I guess with the Jedi Council is comprised of a multi-racial, there's aliens. I guess they wouldn't be aliens. They would be
normal
who they are. But
they'd be who they are.
There's humans, but then there's also other species. So it's like they did introduce that, I guess, in the sequel. But in the sequels, it's the ordinary fighters are of different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And that's another reflection, I think, of Star Wars recognizing, and I guess in a more commercial way. I remember Rogue One. I love that movie. Rogue One's like my fourth favorite of the Star Wars movies. But they intentionally cast 2 Chinese actors because of China's big marketplace,
and that's
as they wanted to connect with the billions of viewers going to the theater in China.
I can't blame them. Why wouldn't
that audience absolutely didn't exist in 1977.
Exactly.
Barely existed in 1999. Definitely existed by that time.
But I think that's the point of it. And commercially, we could look at it, but to the fans, they see it as a representation of them. It might not, be the same or be different or even be similar. Those young people that fall into their crowd and are not noticed are like the clones.
Yeah.
And I think some of that is like subliminally messaged within it.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And I assume you've watched some of the animated Clone Wars.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I love the Clone Wars.
There's almost like seasonally they change the tone of those. Like the first season's kind of a little kiddish. Second season gets a little bit serious. And I think it's the second season where they have that episode where the clone facility is under attack.
Oh, yeah.
And they have like kind of one, and you follow that core group of clones that has like Fives and Commander Cody, I think, is in that group, and
Rex, I believe, is there too.
Yeah, and you start to learn those dynamics. Like, they all look the same, but they have different personalities.
Exactly.
And they all look the same, but they care about each other as individuals. And there's even like the kind of the reject one who something went wrong with his, and he has a hunchback, and he's older, but even he contributes to defending.
That's right.
And they hold him up as a hero. And perfect person to talk about this, considering what you do with propaganda and subliminal messages and stuff like that. It's like messages hidden in plain sight.
That's right.
That you could enjoy these Star Wars movies on face value as just fun fantasy stories set in space, but they're also good reflections of where we are.
Every time. And I don't know if it might have been intentional, it might not have been, but every single Star Wars movie in the generation it was made reflects that generation and what's going on in that generation.
I had a great time talking to you. I hope this isn't the last time we talk. Go back to your school, get your kids listening to these, and maybe you guys can. Do you do podcasting in school?
We don't, but I would love to integrate it a little bit more.
Well, not to give myself a crass pitch, but
do it.
Check out my website, and there's tutorials on how to get podcasting in your classroom, and I would love to hear your students' insights on these. They have a great teacher. They're great, very lucky to have you.
Appreciate that.
And it sounds like you're continuing Mr. Phillips' legacy.
I hope so.
Thank you again.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.